Well, hello everyone. My name is Natalia. I have a long last name, um, Barbiuk Lindström, and I'm working at the Department of Applied Information Technology, Division of Informatics at University of Gothenburg. And today I'm going to talk about communication and communication in relation to metrics. And together with my colleagues, Miroslav, Wilhelm, and Ola, we started a small project. It's about, first of all, we started looking at metrics team stakeholder communication, but now we decided to look at communication about metrics in general. And today I'm going to just tell you some findings from our project. And the presentation, we call it this way, that it's no blame game, or how to succeed in communicating software metrics in the organization. So our project number 37 has a vision to at least to try to understand and to improve communication about metrics in the context of modern software development organizations. So we hope that we can provide some suggestions for enabling effective communication, which can hopefully help organization to create a better understanding of metrics. We hope to contribute to more actionable decisions and to increase employee involvement and productivity. So if I start with this question, why is communication important? And one of my favorite speakers, Simon Sinek, he mentions so-called the golden circle theory, which explains that how leaders or managers can inspire cooperation, trust, and change in business based on asking actually the question, why is it important? So when we started the project, we tried to understand why is it important to learn more about communication? Why is it important to learn more about communication around metrics? And as we know, communication plays a very important role in any organization. And as noted, as one of the most famous American organizational theorists, Carl Weick, communication is the core process of organizing, and it is a mechanism for developing and maintaining relationships, as well as ensuring the work is completed. Also, my experience from the sprint, from the project, that communication in software development context is very complex. It's characterized by constant changes in software development processes, use of multiple communication channels, geographical dispersion, and global collaboration. All this underscores the need to further explore and conceptualize communication problems in software development projects. But now let's turn to metrics. So we know that software metrics are indispensable for quality assurance, and user metrics in practice can also be quite problematic. It's not uncomplicated. Such challenges that you can find in the literature, such as lack of management commitment, challenges with collecting the data that is used or not used, sometimes measuring too much, too soon, or too little, and too slowly, measuring the wrong things, and challenges with metrics definitions and misinterpreting metrics data. This is some of the challenges you can find in the literature. You also know that lack of communication and can result, and often results, in poor understanding of software metrics. And it creates actually ineffective use of it in the organization. So that's why it is important to ensure proper and effective use of metrics in organization. It's important to understand what are the challenges the developers, the managers experience in communication around metrics in order to contribute to developing successful communication strategies. So now it's almost Christmas, and just a second, just let in, yeah. And soon we're going to give presents to each other, julklappar. And very many people think that if you communicate, it's the same as gift giving. you tell something and you expect another person to understand the receiver of your message, to understand what you packed in that Christmas package. So if you pack a pair of socks or jewelry or something, that the person will open and see the same thing. In communication, it's not really like that, because sometimes you perceive, well, I really explained what I wanted to say. I was really clear, but the person can understand, like open the message and see a completely different thing. That's why so many people take communication for granted, but I hope that after this presentation, you keep in mind that it's definitely not a Christmas gift giving, that you need to make efforts for your interlocutor to understand you, and your interlocutor needs to make efforts to understand your message. And sometimes it can be complicated. So the purpose of this talk is to mention some bottlenecks in the process of matrix communication. And I will provide some suggestions how to overcome them. The suggestions provided by the participants, and I want to thank them, everyone who contributed to our interviews. So how to overcome these challenges in practice. So our data, we have 38 semi-structured interviews from 3 software center companies, and each interview is between half an hour, 45 minutes, and we conducted them during 1 year. So it's not big data set. We talked to managers, to metrics team members, and we talked to metrics team stakeholders. We asked them questions about knowledge about metrics, awareness about metrics in their organizations. We asked them about metrics communication. How do you experience communication about metrics? What challenges do you experience? How do you handle them in practice? What channels do you use to communicate about metrics? Just a second. And how do people act on metrics in your organization? What effects do you want to achieve with metrics? So again, this question, why do you need metrics? And what behaviors do you want to encourage with metrics? So these are some of the questions we asked. And now I'm going to present only 3 bottlenecks and 3 suggested solutions. So number 1, and I think that many of you recognize that metrics is very complex. I'm very grateful that so many of my participants, they try to show me how they work with metrics, and all of them mention it's not something that is very easy to explain. So just looking at metrics, for example, it's just data. You need to explain it, to interpret it. And in all organizations, people have some awareness about metrics, but quite uncertain about its purpose and use. So again, we turn back to the power of why. Why do we need metrics? This question is not really answered in all organizations. Some it's clearer, some it's less clear. And it's also related to the lack of terminology. In many cases, as one of our respondents said, that different teams seems to name stuff differently. In some cases, there is not even a name for stuff. That case, we have to put a name on it. So, and if you do not have a term, it's very difficult to create a shared understanding. Just a second. Then also differences in knowledge about metrics on different organizational levels. So developer and developer understand each other and communicate without problem, but they both mention that if you talk to the management, you need to formulate yourself in a different way. As one of our respondents said, you may need to speak a different language. You need to explain in a different way for the manager to understand what you mean. And many people in our research, they mention the challenges with transparency. So you don't really know how much information you should provide. You want to be as clear as possible, and sometimes you kind of feel that people think that you talk too much, you provide too much information, and other people think that, well, you don't provide enough information, you're not transparent. So it's a challenge to know, okay, how much information should I provide? So when I talk to people in all 3 organizations, Their suggestion is that there is a need to develop terminology around metrics. Don't take it for granted that all people know what you mean. You have to develop these terms. And second, there is a need to have a metrics interpreter. And I met some of those people who call themselves, yeah, we are metrics interpreters. We are in between metrics team and management. So we try to interpret the metrics to help the management to understand what the metrics is. And I promise that in this presentation that it will be quite informal and easy to listen during the lunch, but I still want to show you the most classical communication model. Shannon-Weaver model of communication is the most famous one, which shows that we have sender and we have receiver. So if you see here in metrics context, let's say we have metrics team and we have, say, top management. So one side provide metrics, another one needs to act on it. And in between, we need someone, an interpreter. As in medical consultations, when doctor and patient speak different languages, you need someone to take the burden of interpreting, to explain to the management what the numbers mean. Otherwise, there is a risk that risk of misunderstanding, risk of unclarities, and of course, it leads to challenges with making decisions. Another thing that you can see from this model is channel. How, not only what you communicate. For example, here we have encoder, transmitter. You communicate information about metrics using the language, using numbers, etc. But you also use different communication channels. And it relates to the second bottleneck that I can see in the data. Use of multiple communication channels and geographical dispersion. I can say that maybe it's relevant to any communication today that we have so many different tools to communicate and sometimes don't really know how to use them in the best possible way. And I can just let in just a second. That we use dashboards, we use email, Microsoft Teams meetings and chats, debug meetings and reports, but there is a kind of lack of knowledge about affordances of these channels and in what way you can use them to maximize successful transfer of information about metrics. And this is a good question. For example, a good example was that you try to communicate via email and you feel that the person cannot really understand what you mean. And again, it's not only about metrics, but many respondents mentioned that working remotely and lacking face-to-face and face-to-face contact complicated communication. So what suggestion number 2? Strategic use of communication channels. And again, it's very broad, but I can say that we need to learn more how to successfully combine different communication channels. And here we need to consider so-called media richness theory. I don't know whether you heard about it, but different channels, communication channels, they have different level of affordancy to transfer information. So face-to-face meeting, it's a richer communication channel compared to an email. So in conflict situations, on a cases of uncertainties, face-to-face communication is quite beneficial. And many respondents mentioned that we need to learn more how to handle different challenges in relation to metrics communication, what channels which you should use and what combinations we should have. But definitely in case of conflict situations, lack of understanding, we need to meet, which is not always possible. And finally, agreeing on the choice of communication channels. It does happen that one stakeholder knows, well, I have to send a Jira ticket to, and he or she does it. But in another case, that instead of, if you agree on using Jira, suddenly you realize that another stakeholder decides to come to metrics team and talk face to face and get a priority. So it creates it creates stress and negative conflict. So you should agree, if you use certain channels that can work fine, you should use them, you should agree with them, and should follow the agreement. And number 3, metrics can be a sensitive topic. I think all of you know about it, but I can say that it was one of the issues that many managers and developers mentioned. That they mentioned that what is metrics? They say it's a tool to influence decision making and to push the development in a given direction. It should be a good support. Just a second, Richard. It also should be an opportunity to improvement. And it can be a kind of means of control. It sets off alarm. But what all participants experienced, it was a bit of challenging, because sometimes it can become a finger pointing, blaming, or a pressing tool. And that as one of participants said, metrics should not be pressing. It should help us. It shouldn't be a tool to put pressure on people to diminish their achievements. And that is what another person said. We should not end up in people, fading out and saying, okay, they're just judging me. This is what actually was perceived as quite important. And challenging, because in some cases, people didn't really know how to handle the instances when they need to talk about metrics. And so, suggestion number 3, don't forget to give positive feedback. If you remember Shannon and Weaver model, maybe I didn't emphasize that there is the importance of feedback. And I know you have heard about it. It's very important in agile way of working. We hear about that, but it's especially important when you talk about such sensitive topics as metrics. So giving positive feedback is central, and the more knowledge is needed how to do it. And also, if you need to present the results, which can be, not really positive, you need to put it in a professional and not that personal way. And it's also a challenge how to do it. So, and also we need to understand, okay, what do we want to encourage? How can we motivate people? As one of the respondents said, metrics is for control, but not micromanaging. So you have to listen to people, have to trust that they can do the right thing. And here we can talk, quite important aspect in this research is the issue of trust between developers and management. Trust your developers, encourage them, find a level that you can have control, but do not micromanage. As an outsider, I got an impression that developers are proud people, very hardworking people. It was a real pleasure working with them, seeing people who really love what they're doing. And so you need to think about that, because sometimes even small mistakes can make, strong reaction. And one of my respondents mentioned that he sent emails and specifically focused on encouraging people. So keep it in mind, encourage people when you talk about metrics. So saying that, yeah, it can be sensitive, but try to see the positive sides. Try to encourage the people who work with that. So time is almost up, but I have a question to you. Do our findings resonate with your experience as communication around metrics? So metrics complexity, talk about multiple communication channel, geographical dispersion, and that metrics can be a sensitive topic. So anything else? And I know that some people can like to talk, and you can ask your questions. We have 5 minutes left, and if you don't have time to talk, you can just scan and you get to Menti and you can give your comments there. So again, these are just some of the findings. If you're interested more about, for example, communication between metrics team and stakeholders, you're welcome to join the workshop. Thank you so much.